This is a screencast on the American Civil War, and this is going to go through the stages of battles from 1861 until the conclusion in 1865. First and foremost, if I could direct your attention to the upper left-hand corner, there's a box here, and this is going to be the key for the entire screencast. All red numbers, which are located down here, would mean that this is a victory for the South. If this number were blue, that would indicate that it was a victory for the North. If it were orange, that would mean that there's no winner or it's a draw. The first battle of the Civil War after Fort Sumter is the Battle of Bull Run or Manassas Junction. Now it's got two names, primarily because it's going to take place near Manassas Junction, which is a railroad junction, but also Bull Run, named after Bull Run Creek, which runs through here. The battle is going to be led by Irvin McDowell of the North, and he's going to be marching out of Washington, D.C. to Manassas Junction, and P.G.T. Beauregard for the South will be commanding the troops here. This is considered to be a gimme win for the North. It will considered to be by most a victory that will basically end the war. As a matter of fact, politicians even came out to watch the battle from a bluff and packed lunches. And it looked as though the North would rout the South until perhaps the most famous of all actions in the war came with a man named General Stonewall Jackson, and this is where he'll get his nickname. This is Thomas Jackson, and he will get the nickname Stonewall Jackson from some of his troops because as the story goes, the South was being beaten and in retreat, and Jackson rode his horse out into the middle to rally his troops and move them forward. And a soldier said, "Look at Jackson standing there like a stone wall." And from that point forward, he was nicknamed Stonewall Jackson. This action ends up turning the tide, and the South ends up winning, as we see here, the first victory of the Civil War after Fort Sumter. After the Battle of Bull Run, the North will move towards blockading the South and their entire coastline. And this, of course, is part of the plan here by General Winfield Scott with his Anaconda Plan. As the picture here in the upper left sort of shows, the goal here of the blockade was to eliminate the South's ability to profit from their exports. And this is where they were gaining most of their money from exporting cotton. So this will be done, and it will be very effective. The South will experiment with what they call blockade runners, and these were small, very versatile ships, but they couldn't carry enough cargo to really profit. And so the Anaconda Plan, from its blockade perspective, was working. As we've seen to this point, we've seen here battle number 2, which is the Battle of Bull Run. And the next battle we're going to look at shifts to the west, and this is known as the War in the West when we're looking at out in this area. And we're going to look here at what is known as the Battle of Shiloh, which is number 4, otherwise nicknamed Pittsburgh Landing. This battle is known as Shiloh because there was a church in this area, and Shiloh means place of peace, or the name of the church. It's also nicknamed, though, Pittsburgh Landing, and you can faintly see it here in the middle of the screen, but this is an area on the Tennessee River. This is a locality named Pittsburgh Landing where ships could actually land and unload cargo. The commanding general for the South in this battle was Albert Sidney Johnston, seen over here to the right, and the commander for the North was Ulysses S. Grant, seen at the lower bottom on the right. It began early, and the North was repelled all the way back to the banks of the Tennessee River until nightfall. And most of the battle took place at this area called the Hornet's Nest, otherwise also nicknamed the Sunken Road, where it was literally just a road that separated the two armies from battling. And it wouldn't be until the following morning where the North would be reinforced by General Buell and saved the day for the North, and the North ends up beating the South in this battle in the West. The battle shifts back to the east in March of 1862 with the epic Ironclad Battle. Nobody really wins this battle, as you can tell by the orange number 4, but the two ships here were classic in terms of this is the beginning of what might be known as submarine or iron-sided warfare. The South had a ship named the Merrimac, which was then converted into the CSS Virginia, and it found itself battling the USS Monitor, which is the northern ironclad ship. The northern ship, as you can see here in the picture, was submerged with one turret that rotated entirely around. The South ship had several cannons. These ships fought for hours, bombing one another and cannonballs just bouncing off the sides of them until they finally just chugged away, and neither one of them would ever see battle again. And the battle took place here in the Chesapeake Bay, or more specifically known as Hampton Roads. Nobody won this battle, but it is epic in terms of the start of submarine warfare, the first time in the world. The fifth battle that we're going to look at shifts back in April 1862, back to the west. And we're going to look to the southwest, New Orleans. The South had it basically vacated for the most part, other than women. So the North, led by General David Farragut, easily took over New Orleans, captured it, and this was an effort to control the Mississippi River. The North encountered incredible resistance from the women of Mississippi, however, and seen down here, we'll notice from the headquarters of the Department of the Gulf, written by General Strong, that we had repeated insults by women, almost like undercover warfare that was occurring, and they entered into martial law in the South to keep women from causing trouble down here. And this was an executive order in May of 1862, as it says here, ordering women to be actually treated as fellow war individuals. In the summer of 1862, we're going to see that the war is beginning to shift towards the South's favor at this point, one could say. And the 7 Days or Pines Battle, which takes place from June through July, is when the South is going to make a forcible stand here in repelling the North from capturing their capital, which is seen here, Richmond, Virginia. And a few things here will take place that are of significance. The first is Joseph E. Johnston, seen here in the middle, is going to be wounded, and this is going to lead to Lee taking formal command of the Army of Virginia for the rest of the war. And this is a huge part because this is the major leader of the war, Robert E. Lee, and he's going to take control after Johnston's injury. It's also going to show the inadequacies of George McClellan. McClellan will be removed from duty in his inability to capture Richmond, which leads to Pope taking over down here in the lower right, and he took command of the army. In his only battle as commanding general of the Army of the Potomac, he will be defeated at the Second Battle of Bull Run, and then McClellan will be reinstated. But it shows two things: the leader, Robert E. Lee, taking over control, and Abraham Lincoln's major concern that he doesn't have strong leadership. As the summer comes to a conclusion, it will give rise to perhaps, without a doubt, the worst day in American history. It's known as the Battle of Antietam or Sharpsburg. Again, two titles for the same battle, and here's why. It's titled the Battle of Sharpsburg because, as seen here in the middle, the town of Sharpsburg is where the battle is fought, but also Antietam, because seen up here in the upper right is Antietam Creek, which is the creek that runs through the town where the battle takes place. It is considered to be the bloodiest day in American history, as seen up here in the upper right, and the reason for this is the casualties in one single day. The Army of the Potomac, down here at the bottom, will have 75,000 people present for duty that day, and about 12,500 will be killed or wounded. The Army of Northern Virginia, the South, will have 38,000 engaged, and they will lose nearly a third. 10,000 will be killed or wounded in the battle. These extreme losses take place because of two circumstances in the battle. One, known as Burnside Bridge, seen up here in the upper left. And Burnside Bridge is located down here. And what happened was the troops were crossing this bridge, and they had to cross really in only about 3 individuals wide. And it became a terrible affair trying to cross the bridge. The other area that took the toll of many lives was what became known as Bloody Lane. And Bloody Lane is located over here, and this is sort of where individuals were crossing this road, and the attack was very, very close. The bottom line here is it was a horrific day for anybody in the United States, North or South, but it does have an important factor. This is the victory that Abraham Lincoln was looking for that would allow for him, as it's seen here in the middle, it will allow for him to announce the Emancipation Proclamation. And he's wanted to do this, Abraham Lincoln, after a victory. The Emancipation Proclamation is the announcement of Abraham Lincoln on the 22nd of September in 1862 to free the United States of slavery. Here's what is important about this declaration. It is a declaration to free slaves in the United States, but please understand and recall that the South does not consider themselves to be part of the United States. So in essence, this proclamation has very little effect on the South. It lacks teeth, but what it does do, and what Lincoln wanted to make sure occurs, is he wants to make the war a crusade to end slavery. This, in essence, would keep foreign nations from supporting the South financially, as well as maybe in providing troops. No country, Britain, France, is going to support a nation fighting to keep slavery, and that's what the Emancipation Proclamation allows for. After the Emancipation Proclamation, the North began to create and recruit African Americans to fight in the Civil War. Perhaps the most famous of all of them is the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, and this was commanded by Colonel Robert Gould, seen here in the right, and it will also have the first decorated African American soldier in the Civil War, Sergeant William Carney, who will actually win the Medal of Honor as a result of his work in the Civil War. The regiment gains its fame for its attack at Fort Wagner, which protected Charleston Harbor in South Carolina. The vast majority of this regiment dies in this battle of storming Fort Wagner. A famous book has been written on it, One Gallant Rush, and in 1989, the movie Glory was made on it. And if you have cause to watch it, it is a fabulous movie. Abraham Lincoln's pressures and problems become very prominent. He's going to find himself under review by Republicans as a joint committee on the conduct of war is created, and this congressional committee, seen here in blue on the right, was responsible for investigating the management of the war, and it's led by the radical Republicans who were radical abolitionists. They'd like to see this war over and over quickly. Another group known as the Copperheads, here in the red, these are Northern Democrats who are opposed to the war. They're going to pressure him. We're going to see Abraham Lincoln struggle for numbers, and the first draft in American history is going to occur. And a draft is when people are forced to fight in the war. And this leads in green down here at the bottom to the New York draft riots in the summer of 1863. And last and finally, perhaps the most troubling of incidences for him at this time was the loss of his son, William Wallace Lincoln, who dies at a very young age. It led to his wife, her subsequent battles with depression, and very troubling. He's also going to find himself in what became known as the Trent Affair, seen here in purple, and this is an event that the United States became close to having a war with England again because we confiscated one of England's ships known as the Trent, and they were very upset. Bottom line is this is developing into a very, very long, long war. And this long war only benefits the South. After General McClellan was released again from command of the Army, the United States will find themselves led by General Ambrose Burnside, and he will be commander of the Army of the Potomac for one battle and one battle only, and that's going to be at the Battle of Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg is going to be a loss, and it's going to lead to Lee pushing forward into the north. We're going to see here from this map that the push into the north is starting. As we've already seen, Fredericksburg is here, number 9, and that's going to lead to the 10th battle here on this map, which is the Battle of Chancellorsville. And we're starting to see here that Lee is making a push into the north, and we're going to see where this goes. The Battle of Chancellorsville is part of the move into the north by General Lee, and it's going to be led by General Stonewall Jackson. But it's going to come, this victory as seen here, because it's red, it's a victory for the South. It's going to come at a terrible cost. And the cost is that Stonewall Jackson is going to be wounded, actually accidentally shot by his own men in an evening, shot in the arm. He loses his arm, eventually he loses his life. And as Lee said, upon learning of the death of Stonewall Jackson, Lee made the comment that, "I fear I have lost my right arm." And while it's a huge victory for the South, it comes at great cost. As the war in the East is going well for the South, if we go back to the West on the Mississippi River, the war is going very well for the North. The major victory out here is going to be known as Vicksburg. Vicksburg, seen on the map here, is number 11, way out here in the west, and this is basically the battle that solidifies the North's control of the Mississippi River and ultimately wins the West for them. This is one of General Ulysses S. Grant's great victories, and it will propel him to be the commanding general of the Army of the Potomac. And he lays siege to the town of Vicksburg. And what we mean by that is he surrounds it and bombs it. And seen here in the lower right is a cannon which was nicknamed the Whistling Dick. And that's because it would shoot massive cannonballs that would actually whistle and make huge, massive destruction to the ground. And Ulysses S. Grant will win this, and it basically wins the war in the West. The war in the East is still going well for the South, and they're moving, as we see here, up into the north. And in the north here, we're going to notice that Lee is going to have an opportunity to move up into the north, into the town of Gettysburg, which is in southern Pennsylvania. And his thinking here is that if he could win this battle, he would have the opportunity to cut Washington, D.C. off from the rest of the North, basically by doing this. And so he's going to change his game plan. His game plan being make it a long war, don't get captured, sort of from the George Washington mentality, to this is it, I'm going to put everything in the basket now and win the war. This to him is an opportunity to win the war. The Battle of Gettysburg will take place for 3 days in the summer of 1863, July 1 through July 3rd. We're going to see Robert E. Lee of the South against the general for the North, which is going to be Meade. And this is his first opportunity at leading the Army of the Potomac. It is going to become, as it says here in the lower right, this will be the bloodiest battle of the war. Antietam is the bloodiest day. This is the bloodiest battle. It lasts 3 days. And the casualty rates you can see up here, 23,000 wounded or killed for the North, and 23,000 or so for the South. As the battle works out, the first day we're going to see that Meade sort of secures his positions. Day 2 could be the most important of the entire war. We look at this as being the turning point of the war. Well, day 2 could be the turning point of this battle. And then the third day we'll discuss Lee takes the offensive again, and this is going to be called the day of Pickets Charge. Now, if we see here this specific drawn map, north is to the left, but it gives us a good look at how the northern and southern troops were laid out. The north are here at the top with Meade, the south down here at the bottom with Robert E. Lee. And the first day we'll see kind of works like this. General Abner Doubleday sort of attacks here. We get our positions on the first day, but it's on the second day, the defense of the Little Round Top, which is going to be important. Lee wants to take his troops on day 2 and move them around through this summit to try and what we call outflank the north. And we're going to see here that on the defense here on the Little Round Top up here at the far right is going to be a guy by the name of Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, and he's going to be leading the group from Maine. And here at the Little Round Top is where he's going to have an incredible defense. He's going to find himself running out of weapons and ammunition, and so he's going to have to build his defense for the Little Round Top where he knows the battle could be lost. So after the solidification of the first day, we're going to see that General Hood is going to move his troops here and try and get around him. And Chamberlain is going to first make a line of troops going this way to try and propel this movement. But as they run out of weapons, he's going to have them form right angles going down the Little Round Top to prevent any flanking maneuver. And this is going to work out tremendously. Perhaps the greatest single event in the Civil War to prevent the South from taking over at the Battle of Gettysburg. On the next day after this, we're going to see that Pickets Charge is going to be a move into the middle. And Lee's thinking was, after attacking on the left side here the first day, the right side the second day, that an attack to the middle would be unexpected. And to a certain extent it was, but it's going to not work out well, and it's going to be immense loss for the South. This is considered the turning point of the Civil War. After the Battle of Gettysburg, Abraham Lincoln gives perhaps his most famous of speeches, known as the Gettysburg Address. And it's done so to dedicate the cemetery to those people that lost their lives in defense of the town of Gettysburg. And we'll notice here that perhaps the most famous of lines are 87 years ago, a score being 20, and 87 years ago would put the United States back into 1776. So what Abraham Lincoln is saying here is 87 years ago, our forefathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So he's going back to the Declaration of Independence, and he wants to make reference that this war, it's now about upholding what the forefathers of this nation, the United States, wanted, and that is freedom and liberty for all. After the Battle of Gettysburg, Meade is released from command of the Army of the Potomac, and put in possession of commanding it is going to be Ulysses S. Grant. And Grant is going to put in charge of the Atlanta campaign one of his companions, General William Tecumseh Sherman. And this will be known as the Atlanta campaign. And he is going to implement what we call total war. And total war is when we destroy everything in the path of marching through the South. And he is going to begin, as seen down here, item number 12 on the map. And we'll notice it begins here, this march, and he's going to start in Chattanooga. He's going to march down here to Atlanta, and from Atlanta all the way to the sea. And this will ultimately lead to Savannah, Georgia. And this march through Georgia was immensely destructive. The march to the sea helps Lincoln because he wins his re-election. Lincoln is going to be running as a National Union Party member. He gives up on being a Republican because of the radical Republicans opposing him. And he's going to run against his general that he's hired and fired twice, George McClellan, as the Democrat. Interesting enough, he's going to choose as his vice presidential running mate Andrew Johnson, who's a senator from Tennessee, a state that has seceded. And he's known as a Democrat that's a supporter of, Lincoln's. And so it's an interesting choice. The Wilderness Campaign marks kind of the end of the war here for Lee. He's in pursuit of Grant, and Grant is a general that Lincoln has hoped to have for some time. And we'll see here in this overland campaign, right, reaches almost several months, going from May of 1864 all the way to June 24th. But it's going to be these battles up and down throughout the areas of Virginia and so forth. And it's really Lee in hot pursuit by Grant, and Grant will not cease or leave chasing him around. And it leads to basically the end of the war. Lee ends up surrendering at Appomattox Courthouse on the 9th of April in 1865. Grant allows him to surrender with honor, and it's done so in such a way that we can try to bring back peace between North and South. And you see here a picture on the left of what it would have looked like on the interior, and on the right, an actual photograph of what it looked like outside. The war comes to a conclusion on the 9th of April in 1865.